Gravel stings my ankles as Logan Pierce whips his truck door shut so violently the entire frame shudders. He doesn't even look at me, just jabs a finger toward the ground like he's ordering a dog. "Stay in your lane, Myra." His voice is venom, cold, humiliating, loud enough for the 2 road crew techs to hear. The air tastes like metal. My jaw locks. My fists tremble. Something inside me fractures so sharply I swear I hear it. And in that instant, dust swirling around his tires as he speeds off, I know 3 things. He meant it. He wanted to belittle me. I'll never look at him the same way again. My name is Myra Caldwell, and that moment on County Road 16 wasn't the beginning. It was the breaking point. Let me take you back to where this all started, because the story you're about to hear isn't about revenge. It's about justice, patience, and what happens when someone pushes you too far for too long. The first time I noticed something was wrong, we'd been married 3 years. Logan and I met at a construction management seminar in Houston. He was confident, ambitious, and seemed to respect my engineering background. Back then, he'd listen when I talked about load-bearing calculations or foundation integrity. He'd nod, ask questions, even brag to his friends that his wife was brilliant. But somewhere along the way, that admiration curdled into something else. It started small, a dismissive wave when I'd correct him about technical details, a sigh when I'd share ideas at dinner. Then came the jokes, little comments disguised as humor that made me feel stupid for speaking up. I remember the exact moment I realized he didn't see me as his equal anymore. We were at his company's barbecue, and I was explaining soil compaction to his boss. Logan walked over, laughed, and said, "Don't let her bore you with all that nerdy stuff." His boss chuckled awkwardly. I smiled and went quiet. That night, I stared at the ceiling while Logan snored beside me, wondering when I'd become something to manage instead of someone to love. 6 months after that barbecue, I discovered something that made my stomach turn. I was at a project meeting when Marcus, a colleague from another firm, pulled me aside during the coffee break. He looked uncomfortable, like he was debating whether to speak. "Myra, I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Last month at the industry conference, Logan was talking about that drainage system redesign, the one that saved the Riverside project." I nodded. That was my design. I'd spent weeks perfecting it. Marcus shifted on his feet. He told everyone it was his idea. He said he had to walk you through the basics because you were struggling with the calculations. He even joked about keeping you humble. The coffee in my hand suddenly felt too hot. My face burned. I thanked Marcus and walked to the bathroom, where I locked myself in a stall and tried to breathe normally. Logan had stolen my work. Not just stolen it, he'd mocked me while doing it. I didn't confront him that night, or the next. I just watched him differently, like seeing a stranger wearing my husband's face. 2 months later, the promotion I'd been working toward for 18 months was announced. I didn't get it. Instead, it went to Derek, a decent engineer but nothing exceptional. I was confused. My performance reviews were excellent, my projects successful. Then I found the email. I'd borrowed Logan's laptop because mine was updating. His email was open. I wasn't snooping. The subject line just caught my eye. "Ray, Myra Caldwell Leadership Evaluation." My hands shook as I opened it. The email was from Logan to my boss, Jim, sent 3 weeks earlier. It read, "Jim, I appreciate you asking for my input. Honestly, I don't think Myra's ready for that kind of responsibility yet. She's technically competent, but she struggles with decision-making under pressure. She second-guesses herself constantly. Maybe in another year or 2, but right now, I'd hate to see her fail publicly. Just my 2 cents as someone who works with her at home." I read it 5 times. Each word was a knife. He'd sabotaged me, deliberately, methodically, and he'd done it behind my back while kissing me goodbye every morning. That night at dinner, he asked how my day was. I smiled and said, "Fine." Something cold settled in my chest, something I'd never felt before. The dinner party happened 2 weeks later. Logan's parents were visiting, along with his brother and sister-in-law. His mother had cooked a huge meal, and everyone was laughing and sharing stories around the table. Then Logan started in on me. You should have seen Myra trying to parallel park today, he said, grinning. Took her 4 tries. I'm thinking maybe we should sign her up for driving lessons. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile. She's also terrible with directions, he continued. Last week, she got lost going to the grocery store we've been shopping at for 2 years. I had to guide her home over the phone like she was 5 years old. More laughter. His mother patted my hand sympathetically. We all have our weak spots, dear. I felt myself shrinking, disappearing. Logan was holding court, and I was the punchline. When he launched into a story about me supposedly forgetting to pay a bill, something that never happened, I excused myself to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red but dry. I'd stopped crying weeks ago. Now I just felt numb, and beneath the numbness something harder was forming, something that looked like resolve. After that dinner, I changed. Not outwardly, Logan didn't notice anything different, but internally I stopped defending him. I stopped making excuses for his behavior. I started watching him the way you'd study a problem you needed to solve. I began keeping records. When he took credit for something I did, I'd save the original files with timestamps. When he made a belittling comment, I'd note the date and context in a private document. When he undermined me professionally, I'd quietly gather evidence. I wasn't planning anything specific yet. I just knew that if I ever needed proof of who Logan really was, I'd have it. My love for him was dying, but my mind was sharpening. I became strategic where I'd once been trusting, observant where I'd been naive. Logan thought my silence meant submission. He had no idea I was simply done wasting energy on someone who didn't deserve it. At night, lying beside him, I'd plan my next day while he slept peacefully, never suspecting that the woman he'd been dismissing was quietly preparing for something he couldn't imagine. At work, I heard something interesting. During a casual lunch with Patricia from legal, she mentioned that a small private access road connecting to the industrial park was going up for sale. The owner had passed away, and the family wanted to liquidate the asset. It's just a half-mile stretch, Patricia said. Connects County Road 16 to the back entrance of the industrial complex. Probably not worth much, but someone might want it for logistics or development. County Road 16, Logan's daily route to work. He used that access road every single morning to bypass the main intersection that always backed up. It saved him 20 minutes each way. He'd bragged about finding that shortcut, calling himself clever for it. I filed that information away, my mind clicking like a calculator. I didn't have a plan yet, but something told me this detail mattered. I asked Patricia how much the family was asking. She mentioned a figure that made me pause. It was reasonable, very reasonable. Just curious, I said casually. She smiled and changed the subject. That night, I lay awake thinking about that road. The next incident happened 3 weeks later. Tyler, one of the junior engineers at my firm, approached me nervously after a team meeting. He was fresh out of college, eager and honest to a fault. Ms. Caldwell, can I talk to you privately? His voice was almost a whisper. We stepped into an empty conference room. Tyler looked miserable. I need to tell you something, but I don't want to cause problems. I kept my voice gentle. What is it? He pulled out his phone and showed me a presentation. It was my complete proposal for the Henderson project, the sustainable foundation system I'd spent 2 months developing. Every slide, every calculation, every innovative solution. Except Logan's name was on the title page instead of mine. Mr. Pierce presented this at the contractors' meeting yesterday, Tyler said. He said he developed it himself, but I recognized your work from the draft you showed me last month. I thought you should know. My hands didn't shake anymore when I discovered Logan's betrayals. They'd steadied over the months of documentation. Thank you for telling me, Tyler. I appreciate your integrity. He left looking relieved. I sat alone in that conference room, staring at my stolen work on his phone screen, and felt something inside me turn to steel. That evening marked my turning point. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a quiet internal shift that changed everything. I sat in my car in our driveway for 20 minutes before going inside, and I made myself a promise. I was done being minimized, done being undermined. Done hopping Logan would somehow become the man I'd thought I married. That version of him, if he'd ever existed, was gone. But I wouldn't confront him. I wouldn't cry or yell or beg him to change. I'd tried talking before, and he dismissed my concerns as oversensitivity. No, this required something different. Strategy, patience, precision. I would rise in my career despite him. I would rebuild my reputation. I would gather allies. And I would do it all so quietly he wouldn't notice until it was too late. I wasn't his victim anymore. I was a problem solver, and Logan had just become the problem I needed to solve. When I walked inside, he was watching TV, barely acknowledging me. I made dinner, smiled when he half-thanked me, and spent the evening planning my resurrection while he assumed I was just being agreeable. He had no idea the war had already begun. The next 6 weeks, I worked like I'd never worked before. I took on challenging projects and executed them flawlessly. I volunteered for presentations and delivered them with confidence that made people take notice. I stayed late, arrived early, and let my work speak louder than Logan's lies ever could. My boss, Jim, started looking at me differently. At first, he seemed surprised by my initiative. Then I was impressed. Then reliant. When the Westbridge project hit complications, he asked for my input. I provided solutions that saved the client $200,000. "Myra, this is exceptional work," Jim said during a one-on-one meeting. "I don't know what's changed, but you've really stepped up." I smiled. Nothing's changed. I'm just making sure my contributions are visible. Something in my tone made him pause. He studied my face like he was seeing me for the first time. "Keep this up. There are bigger opportunities coming." Around the office, people started seeking my advice. My colleagues remembered why they'd respected me before Logan's whisper campaign. I was building something, a reputation that couldn't be torn down by someone else's lies. At home, Logan noticed nothing. I'd stopped seeking his approval, and he interpreted that as me finally accepting my place. He couldn't have been more wrong. Meanwhile, Logan felt his control slipping. He didn't understand why, but suddenly I wasn't asking his opinion on my work. I wasn't sharing my ideas with him at first. I wasn't looking to him for validation. The dynamic had shifted, and it unsettled him. His response was predictable. He became harsher, colder, more controlling. He started micromanaging everything at home, criticizing how I loaded the dishwasher, how I organized the closet, how I scheduled my time. Every day brought new complaints, delivered with that same condescending tone that made my jaw tight. "You're not doing enough around here, Myra," he said one Saturday morning. "I work all week, and I come home to this mess." The house was spotless. He was inventing problems to justify his need to dominate. But I didn't argue. I just documented. Every criticism, every insult, every attempt to diminish me went into my private records. Dates, times, exact words. I was building a case I didn't know I'd need yet, but instinct told me to preserve the evidence. Logan thought he was winning these small battles. He had no idea he was handing me ammunition. Then came the confirmation I'd been waiting for. Patricia from legal sent me an email with the subject line, "That road sale, update." My heart rate picked up as I opened it. The family selling the access road had filed bankruptcy. The property was going to auction. Patricia had included the listing details, location, size, current condition, and the estimated selling price. It was even more reasonable than I'd thought. I sat at my desk, staring at that listing, my mind working through possibilities. The road connected directly to Logan's route. He used it every single day. It was his shortcut, his clever little advantage that made him feel superior. I opened my banking app. Between my savings and investments, I had enough, easily enough. Something clicked in my mind, not revenge exactly, more like elegant symmetry. Logan had spent years telling me to stay in my lane, making me feel small, stealing my work and sabotaging my career. What if I owned his lane, literally? I scheduled a meeting with Patricia for the following day. That night at dinner, Logan exploded over something trivial. I'd bought the wrong brand of coffee, and he acted like I'd committed a crime. "How hard is it to remember one simple thing?" he shouted. "You're so ungrateful. I work myself to death for this family. And you can't even get coffee right." I looked at him across the table. His face was red, his fists clenched, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not hurt, not even disappointment. Just a vast, calm emptiness where love used to live. "You're right," I said quietly. "I apologize." My submission seemed to satisfy him. He huffed and went back to eating, but inside I was free. I'd finally stopped caring about his approval, his opinion, his presence. He was just a problem to be solved, a chapter to be closed. I finished my dinner in silence, planning my next moves while he ranted about his stressful day. He thought my quietness meant defeat. It meant the opposite. 2 weeks later, I had my promotion review with Jim. He'd scheduled an hour, which surprised me. These usually took 20 minutes. He started carefully. "Myra, I need to address something. When you were up for promotion last year, I received some feedback that gave me concerns about your readiness for leadership." I kept my face neutral. "What kind of feedback?" Jim looked uncomfortable. "Questions about your decision-making capabilities, your confidence under pressure. At the time, I took that feedback seriously because it came from someone close to you who I assumed had your best interests at heart." "Logan," I said flatly. He nodded. "I won't say more than that, but recently I've watched you operate independently. Your work has been exceptional. The feedback I received doesn't match the professional I've observed." I pulled out my tablet and opened a folder I'd prepared. "Jim, I'd like to show you something." For the next 30 minutes, I walked him through my documentation. Every project Logan claimed as his own, with timestamps proving they were mine. Every idea he'd stolen. Every achievement he'd taken credit for. I didn't editorialize or complain, I just presented facts. Jim's expression shifted from surprise to anger to something like shame. "Myra, I owe you an apology. I should have verified that feedback more carefully." "What matters is moving forward," I said calmly. He studied me with new respect. "You've handled this with remarkable professionalism." I smiled. I learned to let my work speak for itself. That afternoon, I received the email I'd been expecting. The auction for the access road was scheduled for 2 weeks from Friday. Bidding would be online, sealed bids only. The winner was announced within 24 hours. I sat at my desk, my finger hovering over the screen. This was the moment. Once I bid on that road, there was no going back. This wasn't just about owning property. It was about fundamentally shifting the power dynamic in my marriage. No, not my marriage. That was already over. I just hadn't made it official yet. I clicked through to the bidding portal and registered. The minimum bid was listed. I calculated what I'd need to offer to guarantee a win, not so high it seemed suspicious, but enough to beat any casual investor. I entered my bid, took a breath, submitted it. Confirmation appeared on screen. Bid received. The auction closes March 15th at 5:00 p.m. Something inside me felt light for the first time in months. Not revenge, justice. Logan was about to learn that the lane he'd told me to stay in was actually mine to control. I closed my laptop and allowed myself a small smile. While waiting for the auction results, I quietly began preparing for other changes. I opened a separate bank account Logan didn't know about and started transferring money from our joint account, only what I'd contributed, carefully documented. I found a small apartment across town and put down a deposit, telling the landlord I'd move in within 2 months. I packed a box of essentials, important documents, sentimental items, my grandmother's jewelry, and stored it in my office. Nothing dramatic, just practical preparations. Logan noticed none of it. He came home late most evenings, complaining about traffic and work stress, then spent his nights watching TV or scrolling his phone. We barely spoke anymore, and he seemed to prefer it that way. One evening, he made a comment that almost made me laugh. "You know, Myra, You've been a lot easier to deal with lately. Less argumentative. Maybe you're finally maturing." I nodded and went back to reading. He thought my silence was growing. Actually, I just stopped wasting words on someone who'd never really listened. The old Myra would have cried at that comment. The new Myra just added it to her documentation. On March 16th, I received the email. "Congratulations, your bid has been accepted." I own the road. The transaction was clean, legal, and completely ethical. I'd purchased a private access road that happened to be critical to my husband's daily commute. There was nothing illegal about it, nothing even questionable, just a simple property purchase. I immediately contacted a property management company I'd researched. "I need to schedule maintenance and implement new usage restrictions," I told them. "This is a private road, and I'm updating its permitted uses." The manager understood. We drafted a notice. Due to structural assessment and repair needs, the access road would be restricted to authorized commercial vehicles only. Timeline: indefinite. Alternative routes available via County Road 16 main intersection. It was all perfectly legitimate. The road did need repairs. I'd had it assessed. The restriction was my right as owner. I wasn't targeting Logan specifically. I was simply managing my property. The fact that this would destroy his convenient commute, that was just a natural consequence of property ownership. The notice would be posted in 10 days, per legal requirements. I slept better that night than I had in years. Logan was furious when the notice appeared. He came home that evening raging about some bureaucrat closing his shortcut. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, waving his phone showing a photo of the posted notice. "That road was fine last week. Now suddenly it needs months of maintenance. This is government incompetence at its finest." I looked up from my laptop. "That's frustrating." "Frustrating? Myra, this adds 40 minutes to my commute. 40 minutes each way. Do you know what that means? I'll be leaving before dawn and getting home after dark." "Maybe you could leave earlier," I suggested mildly. He glared at me. "You don't get it. This is going to destroy my schedule. I have meetings, deadlines, responsibilities." I returned to my work. "I'm sure you'll figure something out." He stormed off, muttering about incompetent planning and bureaucratic nightmares. I bit my lip to keep from smiling. The road closure would take effect Monday. I couldn't wait to see how long it took him to connect the dots. Spoiler, it took longer than I expected. The first week of the closure, Logan was late to work 3 times. The traffic on the main route was terrible, especially during rush hour. What used to be a 25-minute drive now took over an hour. His boss wasn't pleased. I knew this because Logan complained about it every night. "Henderson chewed me out again today, like it's my fault the road is closed. I can't control the infrastructure." By week 2, he'd received a formal warning. By week 3, his coworkers were making comments about his reliability. Logan was unraveling, and he had no idea why this was hitting him so hard. "Everyone else deals with traffic," his colleague mentioned at a company event I attended. "But Logan acts like it's a personal attack." I smiled sympathetically. Change is hard for him. Meanwhile, my commute was unaffected. I'd always taken the main route. I'd never needed the shortcut. But Logan had built his entire schedule around it, and now that foundation was gone. He started leaving at 5:30 in the morning, coming home at 8 at night. He was exhausted, irritable, and professionally compromised. And he still didn't know I owned the road, destroying his life. Then came the news I'd been working toward for 18 months. Jim called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. His expression was serious, but his eyes were warm. "Myra, I want to offer you the senior project manager position, the one that opened up when Derek transferred to the Phoenix office." My heart jumped. This was the promotion Logan had sabotaged last year, the position I deserved. "Your work has been exemplary," Jim continued. "Your leadership during the Westbridge crisis showed me everything I needed to know about your capabilities. You're ready." I kept my voice steady. "Thank you, Jim, I accept." We shook hands. He smiled. "You've earned this. I'm sorry it took so long for me to see what was right in front of me. That afternoon, the company sent out the announcement. By evening, my phone was full of congratulations from colleagues. I went home feeling lighter than air. Logan heard about it through the office grapevine. He came home late, his expression stormy. "So you got Derek's position?" "I did." He grunted. "Don't let it go to your head. Management isn't as easy as it looks." I smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." Inside, I was celebrating. I'd won. Despite his sabotage, despite his lies, despite everything he'd done to keep me down, I'd risen anyway. 2 weeks later, everything came to a head. Logan arrived home at 9:30 on a Tuesday, slamming doors and throwing his briefcase on the couch. "They fired me," he said flatly. I looked up from my laptop. "What?" "Henderson fired me, said my chronic lateness and poor performance left them no choice. Can you believe that?" His face was twisted with rage and disbelief. "All because of a stupid rote closure." "That's terrible," I said, meaning none of it. 5 years with that company and they throw me out over traffic. He paced the living room. "This is discrimination. This is." He stopped suddenly and stared at me. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm just processing it." Something shifted in his expression. "You've been awfully calm through all of this. My life is falling apart, and you're just sitting there like it's any other Tuesday." I closed my laptop carefully. "What do you want me to say, Logan?" "I want you to show some concern, some emotion. You're my wife, and you act like you don't even care." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "You know what? You should have stayed in your lane, this is all." "Don't," I interrupted quietly. "Don't finish that sentence." He stared at me. "What's gotten into you?" I stood up. "I'm done, Logan. I'm filing for divorce." The word hung in the air like smoke. Logan's face went through several expressions: shock, disbelief, then anger. "You're what?" "Filing for divorce. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll receive the papers next week." "You can't be serious. Over what? Because I'm going through a rough patch." His voice cracked. "Myra, I've given you everything. A home, stability, my name." "You've given me nothing but contempt," I said calmly. "You've stolen my work, sabotaged my career, and spent years making me feel worthless. This marriage ended a long time ago. I'm just making it official." He was speechless. For the first time in our marriage, Logan had no comeback, no dismissive comment, no way to twist the situation to his advantage. "You'll regret this," he finally said. I picked up my laptop. "The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner." As I walked toward the bedroom, he called after me. "You should have stayed in your lane, Myra." I turned back. "I don't think you know what lane I'm in, Logan." His confusion was obvious. Good, let him wonder. I moved out that weekend. My apartment was small but bright, with windows that faced east and morning sun that felt like hope. I'd packed efficiently. Most of our shared items held no sentimental value anymore. Logan texted constantly those first few days. Angry messages, then pleading ones, then angry again. I didn't respond. My lawyer handled all communication. The divorce papers were filed. Clean, simple, no fault. I wasn't asking for alimony. I didn't want anything from him except freedom. Friends reached out, surprised by the news. Most had seen signs they'd ignored. "He always seemed so dismissive of you," one friend admitted. "But we thought that was just his personality." I spent my first night alone in my new apartment eating takeout on the floor, my furniture not yet delivered. I felt lighter than I had in years. No tension in my shoulders, no knot in my stomach, just peace. My phone rang. "Logan," I declined the call. He left a voicemail. "Myra, please, we can work this out, just talk to me." I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. There was nothing left to say. The truth came out 3 weeks later. Logan called me from an unknown number. I answered without thinking. "You bought it." His voice was hollow. "The road, you own it." Silence stretched between us. Someone from the management company mentioned the owner's name. "Myra Caldwell, it's you." He sounded dazed. "This whole time you owned the road, you closed it. You destroyed my commute, my reputation, my career. You. I bought a private road that needed repairs, I said calmly. What you're describing are the natural consequences of your dependence on a shortcut you never had permission to use. You did this on purpose. I exercised my property rights. Everything I did was legal and ethical, unlike sabotaging your wife's promotion, unlike stealing her work, unlike undermining her for years. He was breathing hard. You planned this, all of it. I responded to your behavior with appropriate boundaries. If you'd treated me with respect, we'd still be married and you'd still be employed. Every consequence you're facing traces back to your own choices, Logan. You're vindictive. I'm done with this conversation. I hung up. He tried calling back twice. I blocked the number. There was nothing more to say. Over the following months, I heard updates through mutual acquaintances. Logan had lost his job due to chronic lateness and performance issues. His reputation in the industry suffered when word spread about his habit of taking credit for others' work. Tyler had shared my documentation with several colleagues who'd suspected similar behavior. Financial strain hit him hard. Without his income and with mounting debt, he'd had to sell his truck and move to a cheaper apartment. Friends distanced themselves after learning how he'd treated me. The life he'd built on arrogance and deception crumbled without the foundation of my support and stolen work. The road he depended on, his lane, was no longer his to use, and symbolically, neither was I. I heard he'd found work eventually, a lower position at a smaller firm. Not the career trajectory he'd imagined, but appropriate for someone whose success had been built on lies. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, no gloating, just a quiet sense that justice had balanced itself naturally. I hadn't destroyed Logan. I'd simply stopped holding him up. Today, I drove down County Road 16 to visit the access road I own. The repairs were completed months ago, and now it's part of a logistics project my company manages. I stood at the entrance, breathing in clean morning air, watching trucks carrying materials for a development that will benefit the community. This road that once represented Logan's arrogance now represents my resilience. The lane he told me to stay in became the path I chose to own. I've thrived in my new role. My team respects me. My projects succeed. I wake up each morning without dread, without the constant weight of someone else's contempt. I've started dating again, carefully, slowly, with better judgment than I had at 25. Sometimes I think about that moment on County Road 16 when Logan told me to stay in my lane. How small he made me feel. How certain he was of his power over me. He couldn't have known that his cruelty would become my catalyst, that his dismissal would forge my determination, that the woman he'd spent years diminishing would rise higher than he'd ever reach. When someone tells you to stay in your lane, remember this: you might be the one paving the entire road. What would you do in this situation? Have you ever had someone try to keep you small, only to prove them wrong? If stories of resilience and justice speak to you, consider subscribing for more. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay where someone else wants to keep you.